a pretty good hand pre-flop to a very good hand on the flop to a decent hand on the turn to a pretty bad hand on the river. Okay, drum roll. Our opponent had, hey everybody, Phil here. We're going to try something new today. We call this Phil versus the Solver. Or Phil versus Solver. I don't know what we're going to call it. It's going to be something like that. And essentially, I'm going to look through hands that are submitted and go through it, look at what a solver would say to do. I'm going to talk about what I think you should do. And then, just for fun, we'll look at the results and see who was right, even though it kind of doesn't matter because it's a sample size of 1. So without further ado, let's get into it. This one I grabbed from somebody at Run It Once training. But in the future, I'd love to see some hands from you guys. This hand that I'm looking at is at 50 NL, 6 max. And our hero has ace queen offsuit, ace clubs, queen of diamonds. Hijack opens. We're in the cutoff. We 3-bet to 7.5 big blinds from 2.5 big blinds. And the hijack calls. Flop is queen 5-4 with 2 spades and 1 club. Our opponent checks. We bet half pot. Our opponent calls. Relatively standard thus far. Turn is a 3, bringing 2 clubs. And now our opponent leads half pot. So this is a pretty odd spot right away. I'll just tell you the rest of the hand, which is the river is a pretty ugly card, 7 of spades. And our opponent bets again, only 3rd pot. And so we have to put our opponent on a hand, essentially decide what to do with our ace queen, which went from a very good hand on the flop, or a pretty good hand pre-flop to a very good hand on the flop to a decent hand on the turn to a pretty bad hand on the river, to a pure bluff catcher, essentially. So starting with the flop, I'm just going to go into the solver and talk about what is going on the flop. So first of all, betting our hand ace queen for half pot, totally reasonable. It looks like a slightly smaller sizing might be better, but yeah, completely fine. And this is like, we're going to be betting almost 80% of our range. It's a very good flop for us. I guess, they're checking everything. Are they folding pocket pairs a little bit, it looks like. Anyways, this is a good flop for us. They don't have a lot of 2-pair, like queen 5 suited, queen 4 suited aren't in there. 5-4 suited is, but barely any combos. They don't have queens because they 4-bet pre-flop. And so like 5-5 and 4-4 are the only things that beat us. So, and 5-4 suited, which is rare. Anyways, we bet, get called. So an important thing to note here is that almost all 5-5 and 4-4 are supposed to raise the flop for our opponent. And that's kind of what I would expect most people to do. But it's going to become relevant because those make up some of the value hands that make the most sense later. I guess that's a bit of a spoiler. So on the 3 of clubs, 6-7 gets there, which our opponent can definitely have, and ace deuce gets there, which our opponent can have. Obviously, both of those only the suited variety, assuming it's a regular. 6 deuce is not going to be in our opponent's range, and 5-3, 4-3 are not going to be in there. So solver is essentially pure checking this turn. It bets like 5% of the time or so. And so I would, in practice, I would simplify that to never leading. But our opponent did lead. So this is, I think, a key in the hand to figure out, what kind of hands would our opponent start betting with here. It's one of those spots where it feels like it's a good card for out of position because 6-7 gets there, and the board just the 3 straights hit and might get scary for overpairs, and ace king and ace jack have to fold and to half pot and things like that. So I could see a lot of people viewing that as a good scare card when in actuality not much has changed. One thing I want to consider, so out of position on the flop is supposed to mostly fold 3-3, which 3-3 is a hand that, if it never folds flop, makes a lot of sense for this line, to check call and lead turn, because you kind of expect a lot of checkbacks potentially. Anyways, that's supposed to usually fold. If our opponent usually folds it, who knows? So now in the river, our opponent's using 3rd pot, which is a good sizing choice, according to the solver. It's interesting to me. So according to the solver, Out of position, I mean, is mostly going to check, but going to do, when it does bet, a lot of third potting and then a tiny bit of all-in jamming. And it's a little counterintuitive to me because the way that I would read this spot would be out of position as, either some kind of bluff, some kind of two-pair set, or a flush, or a straight, I guess. So straights, I think, make sense to go small, and sets and straights do make sense. But I would think there are enough flushes in there that that you'd want to go big more frequently. Let's just see how often the solver has a flush. Solver has a flush almost 20% of the time, yet it actually doesn't want to bet them very frequently. I guess because it's checking its range so often. Anyway, so against the sizing that we did face, third pot, ace queen is supposed to call sometime, like call a little more than half the time. And our hand in particular, ace of clubs, queen of diamonds in particular is supposed to fold because I guess the ace of clubs is going to be part of our opponent's bluffing range, like ace jack of clubs, which does make a lot of sense. Check call flop with ace jack, backdoor straight draw, backdoor nut flush draw, lead when you turn the gut shot and the flush draw, and then just bet small when everything gets there on the 7. So our hand's supposed to be a fold. In the actual hand, our hero called, and so now I need to think about if I agree with the solver about folding this hand. And to be honest, I was looking at this hand before the video started, and I've gone back and forth a lot because on the one hand, like I said, I think flushes would go bigger. I think that 5-5 and 5-4 and 4-4 would raise the flop. I think that straights make some sense, but there are so few straights in out of positions range, right? There's 6-6, which may or may not bet the turn. There's 5-6 suited, which may or may not bet the turn. And even that, like, does that get folded pre-flop? Yeah. So it gets folded. It doesn't open very often, 5-6 suited. But of course, we don't know what our opponent's doing. But anyways, yeah. So there's 6s, 5-6 suited, 7-6 suited, of course. There's no 8-6 suited, or is there? Yeah, there's ace-6 that's supposed to fold pre, even suited. So I don't think there are a lot of straights. So my gut reaction was this seems like a spot where he's repping a straight, but I don't think he's going to really have a straight. So I think it's probably a bluff. And I think that because flushes, if they get here, are just going to want to bet big, then it's got to be a bluff. But the problem there is you have to think about what he's bluffing with. So he check called half pot on queen 5-4, spade spade. So a pair or a flush draw, occasionally a really strong backdoor hand, but like what strong backdoor hand is it? And I think one thing to keep in mind is that let's say that our opponent has 8-7 of clubs, and so they've gotten here on the river and they've river to 7. That's actually a hand that has some showdown value because we could have played this way with ace-5 suited. We could have played this way with ace-jack, ace-queen of clubs. And so I think some people, if they get here with 8-7 of clubs, might decide not to bluff with it because they have some showdown value. So how did our opponent get here with pair is the challenge. So these are some of the most interesting spots in poker and some of the most difficult spots to figure out, where it seems like the bluffs are really unlikely, and it also seems like the value bets are really unlikely. And you have to try to approximate and really assign a value to just how unlikely is it compared to just how unlikely is this. So value hands that make the most sense to me: 3-3, 7-7, 6-6. I think those far and away make the most sense. Maybe 5-6. And I think those make. I mean, like the solver said, we don't see a lot of turn leading here. I wouldn't expect a lot of turn leading, but we did see a turn lead, so we have to figure out what that meant. And those are hands that all kind of make sense. Leading 3-3, I think if you check called flop with it, makes a lot of sense. If you check called flop with 5-5 or 4-4, you're just like, well, now our opponent's probably going to check back a lot of stuff because this board got scary, so let's get our value. And then similar with, like, I could see 6-6, 7-7, 5-6 seeing this turn and saying, okay, well, I want to get protection against ace king, what have you. and I have decent equity. I might have the best hand. If I don't have the best hand, I have equity, so it's okay. So I could see that making some sense. And then if you get here to the river with the 7 high straight, I do think you small bet, so that makes a lot of sense. If you get here with 7-7 or 3-3 or 5-5 or 4-4, I think you small bet. I think that makes a lot of sense because you don't run into a lot of straights. So despite the flop play and turn play being unexpected with a lot of those hands, the river play makes a lot of sense with them, and I can see the logic for the flop and turn play. So another really important hand category to think about is spades. My gut reaction is that spades are going to bet big on the river because they can, and people get greedy. And like it looks like a board that's really bad for, let's say, ace queen. So I think a lot of times people prefer to bet really big and polarize and hope that their opponent has like ace of spades with the queen, and it's just like, well, he's saying he has a flush or nothing, and I beat nothing, and I have a spade, so I call. So I think people get greedy with spades usually, but of course we have to assign some probability to this unknown opponent taking this line with spades. So that exists. So then what are the bluffs? That's the really hard part, because if our opponent check called the flop with 10-10, I don't think they're leading the 3. If they do lead the 3, are they bluffing the 7 of spades river? Maybe, but I just don't think they're leading the 3. And so what we need is our opponent to have check called like an ace king offsuit that they didn't 4-bet pre-flop, or the ace jack of clubs, which with our club we block, or like a king jack of clubs, some kind of really weak backdoor hand. And the other problem with all of this, I guess maybe like ace jack with the ace of spades makes some sense, but I think that jams river with the ace of spades. So the problem with all this is I just can't think. I think both value bets and bluffs are kind of unlikely, but I think the bluffs are just so unlikely that I'm going to go ahead and side with the solver and say that we need to fold. So now I do have, I have to look up where that hand was, but I do have the answer. So we get to see if both the solver and I were right, or if we were both wrong. Okay, drum roll. Our opponent had 5-4 of hearts. So it was the check call with 5-4, not the check raise, which would obviously be fine. And I think then the rest makes sense. Like I said, I was mentioning sets, but of course 5-4 can be in there. I thought it was maybe supposed to be folded pre-flop, or I guess it's in there a tiny bit. But it does make sense. You get to that turn and you're like, well, the opponent, my opponent's going to check back a lot of stuff. I want to get value now. Go for it. You get to that river. It's a good value bet on the river that a lot of people miss. They get scared of the 7, they get scared of the spades, but your hand's usually good there. You're usually up against one pair. Your in position is not 3-betting a lot of 6x, so you're just worried about flush draws. So well played, I think, by our opponent, given the strange line that our opponent took. And I think our hero should fold the river. Obviously, it's easy for me to say he probably had it when our hero is getting laid 4-1 odds and only needs to be right 20% of the time to make a call good. But I think probably he's right, less than 10% of the time, because it's just so hard to come up with bluffs that play this way. And actually, the ace of clubs is a pretty relevant blocker. Hopefully, you enjoyed the first edition of Phil vs. Solver, or whatever we called this. And if you'd like to see more, let me know. And also let me know if you want to submit some hands. We'll figure out how to receive them from you. I guess actually YouTube comments are as good a place as any to paste a hand history. And don't need to give me any relevant reads, just a hand history, and I'll figure it out. That's it. See you next time.